The first fire plan was launched in the year 1951 and went on to 1956. Okay. The first fire plan from 1951 to 1956. Right. India was facing immediate challenges. The most important challenge was food security. We were terribly hurt by the larger food insecurity problem, and everybody were facing food shortage. So we had to target immediately all this and work upon specifics. Newly independent country, we have declared ourselves a republic. Elections are held. In constitutional government is in place because 1946 elections, so we were not still independent. Not everybody got to vote. But now, after 1950, we have declared ourselves a republic. Every adult above the age of 21 has been given the right to vote. Independence bandaga, universal adult suffrage and win madadvi. Avaga the minimum age for voting was 21. Right, Rajiv Gandhi time period alli 1986 alli we reduced that age from 21 to 18. So first time all adults above the age of 21 got to vote. Right, a popular elected government is in place. Planning commission is in place. On that basis, we have the planning commission now coming up with the plan. The first fire plan, the architect of the first fire plan was K.N. Raj. The architect of the first fire plan was K.N. Raj. We followed what was called the Harrod-Domar model. We followed what is called the Harrod-Domar model. Harrod-Domar model. The architect of the first fire plan was K.N. Raj, and we followed what is called the Harrod-Domar model. Okay, this is the idea that we followed in terms. Specifically, that idea that we are working on what basis, what is the thought that we are specific working on. K.N. Raj, Harrod-Domar model, right? Overall understanding in terms of what has been implemented and how it's coming. What is the Harrod-Domar model? Harrod-Domar model specifically talked about you have to focus on one area of importance, and that one area, all focus should be put into that one area. Right? That's the idea of Harrod-Domar model. One area of importance for the entire economy and all effort towards that one area. Right? Which is that one area we chose? Obviously, we chose agriculture. Because a large amount of population was rural, large dependency was on agriculture, immediate target was to achieve food security. So we focused on agriculture. So every effort that was put across during the first fire plan was focused on agriculture, right? We focused on every aspect of agriculture. So in terms of working on aspect related to irrigation, high yielding varieties of seeds, fertilizers, mechanization of agriculture, because a large part of India was still following rudimentary, sedimentary agriculture. So all these areas of agriculture we focused upon. Irrigation, high yielding varieties of seeds, fertilizers, mechanization. These were all areas that we focused upon. So that there is entire focus on this specifics, right? And every impact was put across, areas were taken into consideration so that we'll be able to achieve food production, right? Specific area where we needed impact was irrigation, because seeds, fertilizers and others is something that we were working upon, but irrigation needed a specific impact. So how can we build across? Now, largely North Indian rivers are all perennial rivers. Perennial rivers, you understand? They flow throughout the year, right? Himalayan rivers, they flow throughout the year. So how can we make use of these perennial rivers effectively? So we were learning from international models, right? ಬೇರೆ ಬೇರೆ ಕಂಟ್ರೀಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾವ ತರ ಇಂಪ್ಲಿಮೆಂಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ಲರ್ನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ವಿ. ಆ ಬೇಸಿಕ್ಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ in USA they had something called a multi-purpose project built on Tennessee River. On River Tennessee, they had built a multi-purpose project, and India wanted to emulate that model, right? And we emulated that model, building a multi-purpose project on one of our river. Okay, right? What is called the Sorrow of Bengal? Sorrow of Bengal is River Damodar, right? Presently also what is called Sorrow of Bihar? Kosi, right? So River Kosi is even today called the Sorrow of Bihar. Why is this called Sorrow of Bengal, Sorrow of Bihar? Right? Because they continuously change their course and they heavily flood the region, and that's why it is called the Sorrow of Bengal or Sorrow of Bihar. Okay, so Damodar is no more called the Sorrow of Bengal because we built a multi-purpose project on River Damodar. Multi-purpose project on River Damodar. That's why ಅಲ್ಲಿ Tennessee Valley Corporation ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು. ಆ ತರ ಇಂಡಿಯಾದಲ್ಲಿ ದಾಮೋದರ್ ವ್ಯಾಲಿ ಕಾರ್ಪೊರೇಷನ್ ಅಂತ ಬಿಲ್ಡ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ವಿ. ಓಕೆ, Farakka Barrage was taken into consideration. Large amount of water was considered, based on which we built a multi-purpose project. Right? What is this multi-purpose project that we are talking about? The multi-purpose project focused on irrigation, on drinking water, on hydroelectric power, and effectively with all this on flood control. Right, on irrigation, on drinking water, on hydroelectric power and flood control. So multiple purposes were targeted towards one project, and Damodar Valley Corporation gave a larger benefit in that direction. Right, it solved a lot of irrigation related problems to all surrounding areas. Right, that was one of the biggest benefit of such. Right, it was not only Damodar Valley Corporation that we focused upon, we also worked along with that on what is called the Bakra Nangal, Nafta Jakri, they were all built on large river called Satluj. Right, so huge dams they were all. Right, Nehru called them the modern temples of India. Nehru called all of them as modern temples of India because ಇವತ್ತಿನ ಭಾರತಕ್ಕೆ ಬೇಕಾಗಿರುವಂತ ದೇವಾಲಯಗಳಿವು. Right, ಜನರನ್ನ ಉಳಿಸೋದಕ್ಕೂ ಜನರನ್ನ ಬೆಳೆಸೋದಕ್ಕೂ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇರುವಂತದ್ದು. These are the blessings that we need. Okay, so this ensured very good irrigation. Government focused on high yielding seeds, on fertilizers. Government encouraged farmers towards more and more mechanization. Ishton large swaths of land alli sedimentary agriculture using very old equipments ಮಾಡೋದ್ರಿಂದ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಪ್ರೊಡಕ್ಟಿವಿಟಿ ತುಂಬಾ ಕಡಿಮೆ ಇರುತ್ತೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ ಇದೆಲ್ಲದರ ಮೇಲೂ ಫೋಕಸ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಇರಿಗೇಷನ್ ಮೇಲೆ ಸಾಕಷ್ಟು ಎಫರ್ಟ್ ಹಾಕೋದ್ರಿಂದ agriculture got all the necessary support it required. So large amount of food production resulted. Right, so food production increased and India was facing terrible food shortage and then a problem na solve ಮಾಡೋದಕ್ಕೆ ತುಂಬಾ effort ಹಾಕಿದ್ವಿ. Huge amount of food productions came across. Right, now that food production increased very much, to ensure that this food supply reaches across this country, we used the PDS network that was existing. Right, who established PDS network? India had just then become independent. Remember, it was the British who established the PDS network. During the Second World War, around in 1942-43, British established PDS network in India. Why did British establish PDS network in India? Second World War on its peak, right? India, there was terrible food shortage. Why? Because Japan had started occupying many regions and Japan had come to India's border. It occupied Burma. When it occupied Burma, a lot of rice supply was coming from Burma to India. In that sense, India started facing a huge shortage of rice. That created trouble. Britain was fighting World War. Britain had bigger enemies to fight. And ಇಂಡಿಯಾದಲ್ಲಿ ಫುಡ್ ಶಾರ್ಟೇಜ್ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಆಗ್ಬಿಟ್ರೆ ಜನ ಏನಾದ್ರು ದಂಗೆ ಹೇಳಕ್ ಶುರು ಆದ್ರೆ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಇಲ್ಲೂ ತೊಂದರೆ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ, ನಾವು ಅಲ್ಲೂ ಫೈಟ್ ಮಾಡಕ್ಕಾಗಲ್ಲ ಅನ್ನೋ ದೃಷ್ಟಿಯಿಂದ ಆ ಟೈಮಲ್ಲಿ ಬ್ರಿಟಿಷ್ ಎಸ್ಟಾಬ್ಲಿಷ್ಡ್ PDS network across India. We used that PDS network to supply food grains when a large amount of food production happened to the first 5-year plan. Clear? That's how the first 5-year plan came about. So that Second World War time ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಏನ್ ಹೆವಿ ರೈಸ್ ಶಾರ್ಟೇಜ್ ಆಯ್ತಲ್ಲ ಅಕ್ರಾಸ್ ಇಂಡಿಯಾ ತುಂಬಾನೇ ಕೆಟ್ಟ ಬರಗಾಲ ಆಯ್ತು. ರೈಟ್, ಯಾರಾದ್ರೂ ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ತುಂಬಾ ಓಲ್ಡ್ ಅಜ್ಜಿ ತಾತಂದ್ರೆ ಇದ್ರು ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಅವ್ರನ್ನ ಕೇಳಿ ಎಷ್ಟು ಕೆಟ್ಟ ಬರಗಾಲ ಇತ್ತು ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಆ ಟೈಮಲ್ಲಿ ದಿನದಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದ್ಸತಿ, ವಾರದಲ್ಲಿ 2 ಸತಿ ಅನ್ನ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ಹೆಚ್ಚು ಅನ್ನೋ ತರ ಇತ್ತು. ರೈಟ್, ದಟ್ಸ್ ಹೌ ಬ್ಯಾಡ್ ಇಟ್ ವಾಸ್. ರೈಟ್, ಬೆಂಗಾಲ್ ಫಮೈನ್ ಅಂತ ಒಂದು ಸ್ಟೋರಿ ಇದೆ. ಯೋರ್ ಶಶಿ ತರೂರ್ ರೈಟ್ಸ್ ಇನ್ ಹಿಸ್ ಬುಕ್. ರೈಟ್, ಹಿ ಸೇಸ್ ಎಂತೆಂತವ್ರನ್ನೋ ನೀವು ಕೆಟ್ಟ ರೂಲರ್ ಅಂತ ನೋಡಿದ್ರ, ವಿನ್ಸ್ಟನ್ ಚರ್ಚಿಲ್ ಇಸ್ ದಿ ವರ್ಸ್ಟ್ ರೂಲರ್ ಇನ್ ದಿ ವರ್ಲ್ಡ್. ಇಂಡಿಯಾದಲ್ಲಿ ಸಾವಿರಾರು ಜನನ್ನ ಬಡತನದಿಂದ ಇದರಿಂದನು ಹಸುರಿಂದ ಸಾಯಕ್ ಬಿಟ್ಟಂತ ಒಬ್ಬ ರೂಲರ್ ಅವನು. ರೈಟ್, ಮ್ಯಾಸೆಕರ್ ಅದನ್ನ ಕರಿಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನೋ ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಶಶಿ ತರೂರ್ ರೈಟ್ಸ್. ರೈಟ್, ದ ಇನ್ಗ್ಲೋರಿಯಸ್ ಎಂಪೈರ್ ಅಂತ ಏನ್ ಬುಕ್ ಬರೀತಾರಲ್ಲ ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ಹಿ ಇಸ್ ರಿಟನ್ ಅಬೌಟ್ ವಿನ್ಸ್ಟನ್ ಚರ್ಚಿಲ್ ದಟ್ ವೇ. ಇಟ್ಸ್ ಅ ವೆರಿ ಡಿಫಿಕಲ್ಟ್ ಟೈಮ್. ರೈಟ್, ದಟ್ ವಾಸ್ ಆಲ್ಸೋ ವೆನ್ ಅ ಲಾಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಇನೋವೇಷನ್ ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟೆಡ್. ಅಲ್ಲಿವರೆಗೂ ದೋಸೆ ಅಂಡ್ ಇಡ್ಲಿನ ನೀವೇನ್ ಅಕ್ಕಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ರಿ, ದ ಇಡ್ಲಿ ರವೆ ದೋಸೆ ವರ್ಷನ್ಸ್ ಬಂದಿದ್ದು ಅದೇ ಟೈಮ್. ಓಕೆ, ಬಿಕಾಸ್ ರೈಸ್ ಶಾರ್ಟೇಜ್ ಯಾವಾಗ ತುಂಬಾ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಆಯ್ತು, ಜನ ಬೇರೆ ಏನ್ರಿಂದ ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು ಅನ್ನೋ ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ಗೋಧಿ ನುಚ್ಚಲ್ಲಿ, ಅಕ್ಕಿ ನುಚ್ಚಲ್ಲಿ ಅನ್ನೋ ಬೇಸಿಸ್ ಮೇಲೆ ಶುರು ಆಗಿದೆ. ರೈಟ್, ಸೊ ಇಡ್ಲಿ ದೋಸೆ ರವೆ ವರ್ಷನ್, ರೈಸ್ ವರ್ಷನ್ಸ್ ಆರ್ ತಮಿಳ್ನಾಡು, ಬಟ್ ರವೆ ವರ್ಷನ್ಸ್ ಆಫ್ idli dosa are from Karnataka. This is the time around all these ideas came. The first 5-year plan focus entirely was on agriculture. Government put a lot of effort in this direction, build dams, build Damodar Valley Corporation, lot of ideas came into, food production increased, so much increase that we felt, the feeling was that we have solved the problem of food security. We have achieved very good production, this will continue. Right, ಇನ್ನಷ್ಟು ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಹೊತ್ತು ಕಡಿಮೆ ಆಗಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ ಇದನ್ನೇ the feeling was that we have achieved, because through the PDS network we started distributing a lot of food grains and we felt we have solved the problem. In that way, first 5 plan was very successful in terms of what we wanted to achieve and how we achieved this. Okay, as I said, see, Nehru was a visionary leader, right? First prime minister, visionary leader. He knew that his job is something that is cut out for the country. The benefit with leaders at that point of time, Nehru was not the only leader, he was supported by a host of leaders across the country, right? With Patel in the center, we also had Bullabhai Desai in Uttar Pradesh, we had B.R. Roy in West Bengal, right? C.R. Das, who died a little early, but we had Rajaji in southern India, we had Morarji Desai in Bombay province, right? So across India, we had a host of leaders. All of them were supporting the entire cause very well. In that sense, the idea of nation building was taking a good pace. Every decision making had a lot of support. And that's how we were able to take things forward, right? Nehru did not focus only on one area. He knew he had to build things on a specific. So first 5 plan, the focus was not only on agriculture. Focus was also brought about when you take in consideration in terms of education. So we built IITs. The first 5 plan gave focus on Indian Institute of Technology, right? These were premier technology institutes which will produce top quality engineers who will now become contributors to the nation. This was the understanding, right? Later on, the same model, we went on to build what is called IIMs, Indian Institute of Management. Okay, so the best people came out across this who went on to serve the nation in different capacities. IITs and IIMs have even today remained one of the most premier institutes of technology and management which people dream to. All of them found its foundation during the first 5 plan. These were not built completely on Indian money. We took a lot of international support. The first IIT came out in Roorkee. There it was supported by Germany. Then we had in Kharagpur. Kharagpur was supported by UK. Bombay was supported by Russia. And other different countries, we had found support based on which all of these IITs came across. Similarly, IIMs. Today we have a large number of them. Initially, we had very less number of them. Were very high end. The criticism was that first 5 plan, newly independent country, instead of focusing on primary, secondary education, direct higher education will focus ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ರು ಅಂತ criticism ಇತ್ತು. But Nehru's idea was different, that illinda output ಆಗುವಂತವರು, if they are able to contribute to the country which is in need, if we get very high quality human resource, that is what we are looking for. So that also started during this time period. Okay. Further, we also focused on the area of space research, right? Nehru was very clear that this country needs to live for 100 years. We can't be dependent. We have declared we want to be a sovereign country. So every decision making should be ours. So ನಾಳೆ ದಿವಸ ನಾವು ಇನ್ನೊಬ್ಬರ ಮೇಲೆ ಡಿಪೆಂಡೆಂಟ್ ಆಗಿ ಇನ್ನೊಬ್ಬರನ್ನ ಕೇಳುವಂತ ಪರಿಸ್ಥಿತಿ ಬರಬಾರದು ಅಂತ. ಸೊ ವಿಕ್ರಮ್ ಸಾರಾಭಾಯ್, ಸತೀಶ್ ಧವನ್ ಇವರ ಲೀಡರ್ಶಿಪ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಫಸ್ಟ್ 5 ಪ್ಲಾನ್ ಅಲ್ಲೇನೆ ಇಸ್ರೋ took shape, Indian Space Research Organization, right? So space research related lot of activities started. Similarly, right, Nehru was a leader who was focusing on a lot of right, imagine the world situation at that point of time. Communist bloc, capitalist bloc, right? War like situation always. Cold War terribly burning. Lot of arms race. USA had already developed nuclear weapons. USSR was also developing nuclear weapons. So everybody were trying to capture. NATO on one side. The same USA-led bloc had set up CETO, CENTO. All these were groupings which were trying to contradict USSR. So USSR built what was called the Warsaw Pact. There was terrible war-like situation. In the situation, India and many countries like India decided that we will neither join this, neither join them. Haganta, we did not remain silent. We formed a third world countries grouping, and the third world countries grouping was NAM, non-aligned movement. As part of non-aligned movement, we wanted to integrate and work along. That's the challenge that we took. When we brought in the idea of NAM or non-aligned movement, the focus was simple. The focus was to ensure development happens for developing countries. While we talked about non-violence, while we talked about disarmament, ಈ ಆರ್ಮ್ಸ್ ರೇಸ್ ನೆಲ್ಲಾನು ಒಬ್ಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ವಿ ಥ್ರೂ ನಾನ್ ಅಲೈನ್ ಮೂವ್ಮೆಂಟ್, ಬಾಂಧೂಮ್ ಕಾನ್ಫರೆನ್ಸ್, ಆಫ್ರೋ-ಏಷ್ಯನ್ ಕಾನ್ಫರೆನ್ಸ್, ಈ ರೀತಿ ಸಾಕಷ್ಟು ಎಫರ್ಟ್ ಹಾಕಿದ್ವಿ. ಇಂಡಿಯಾ ದೃಷ್ಟಿಕೋನದಿಂದ ನೆಹರು ವಾಸ್ ವೆರಿ ಕ್ಲಿಯರ್ that we are living in such a neighborhood. There are great friends like Pakistan and China on either side. So we will have to focus on security. The first preference comes to be security. So under Homi Jahangir Baba's leadership, we started on atomic energy research also. The first fire plan gave boost for atomic energy research. Right. So a lot of effort was put in this direction. Right. So if India is doing very good in all these areas today, ಆ ಎಲ್ಲಕ್ಕೂ ಕೂಡ ಫೌಂಡೇಶನ್ ಶುರು ಆಗಿದ್ದು ಈ ಟೈಮ್ಸ್. Right. So it was not that Nehru ಒಬ್ಬರೇ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು ಅಂತ. Under his leadership, all decisions were very far sighted. It was not looking at ಇವಾಗ ಬಂದಿದ್ದೀವಿ ಇವಾಗ ಎಷ್ಟು ಅಷ್ಟಕ್ಕೆ ನೋಡೋಣ ಅಂತಲ್ಲ. ರೈಟ್. ನೀವು ಅವರು ಮಿಡ್ ನೈಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇಂಡಿಪೆಂಡೆನ್ಸ್ ಬಂದಾಗ ಸ್ಪೀಚ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ, ಥರ್ಸ್ಟ್ ವಿತ್ ಇಂಡಿಪೆಂಡೆನ್ಸ್ ಸ್ಪೀಚ್ ಅಂತ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರಲ್ಲ, ಆ ಸ್ಪೀಚ್ ಒಂದ್ಸತಿ ಆ ವರ್ಡ್ಸ್ ಅನ್ನ ಗಮನಿಸಿ. There is a clear message that put forward that now is when a nation is born, and each and every one of us have to put effort to build this nation forever. Right? That's why when Narendra Modi became Prime Minister in 2014, there were very good news reports of very senior journalists who said, after Nehru, because Nehru was the first Prime Minister who talked about it is the responsibility of the people also to work along and to build the nation for the future. Right? ಅದಾದ್ಮೇಲೆ ಜನರಲ್ಲೂ ಕೂಡ ಒಂದು ರೆಸ್ಪಾನ್ಸಿಬಿಲಿಟಿ ಇದೆ, ನಾವೆಲ್ಲ ಒಟ್ಟಿಗೆ ಸೇರಿ ದೇಶನ್ ಕಟ್ಟೋಣ ಅನ್ನೋ ಮಾತು ಹಾಡಿದ್ದು. ರೈಟ್. ಒನ್ ವಾಸ್ ವಾಜಪೇಯಿ ಅಂಡ್ ದಿ ಅದರ್ ಒನ್ ವಾಸ್ ನೌ ನರೇಂದ್ರ ಮೋದಿ. Right. So that's why initially it was Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas. Then came across the idea of Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, Sabka Vishwas in 2019. Right. So taking everybody along ಅನ್ನೋದ್ರ ಜೊತೆಗೆ ವಿಶ್ವಾಸ್ ಕೂಡ, in terms trust of people ಕೂಡ ಬೇಕು. 2022, when we are talking of 75 years of India's independence and the vision of that ಮುಂದಿನ 25 ವರ್ಷಗಳಲ್ಲಿ when we become 100 years of independence, we need to be a developed country, ವಿಕಸಿತ ಭಾರತದ ಕಡೆಗೆ ನಾವು ನಡಿಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದಾಗ he added another word which was said sabka prayas. So sabka saath, sabka vikas, sabka vishwas, sabka prayas. So sabka prayas ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಏನು, ಪ್ರತಿಯೊಬ್ಬ ಭಾರತೀಯನು ಕೂಡ ಆ ನಿಟ್ಟಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಎಫರ್ಟ್ ಹಾಕಬೇಕು. ರೈಟ್. ದಟ್ಸ್ ವೈ he said ಮುಂದಿನ 25 ವರ್ಷಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಇದೇನ್ ಜನರೇಷನ್ ಇರುತ್ತಲ್ಲ, ಆಲ್ ಆಫ್ ಯು ಆರ್ ಪಾರ್ಟ್ ಆಫ್ ದಿಸ್ ಅಮೃತ ಕಾಲದಲ್ಲಿ ಇರುವಂತಹ ಅಮೃತ್ ಪೀಡಿ ಅಂತ. ದಟ್ಸ್ ದಿ ಐಡಿಯಾ ದಟ್ ವಾಸ್ ಪುಟ್ ಫಾರ್. ಓಕೆ. ಸೊ ವಿ ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಟು ನಾಟ್ ಜಡ್ಜ್ ಹಿಸ್ಟ್ರಿ ಫ್ರಮ್ ಟುಡೇಸ್ ಪರ್ಸ್ಪೆಕ್ಟಿವ್. There is a lot of Nehru bashing that happens and people feel very happy telling that Nehru was this, Nehru was that. Right. The effort every leader at that point of time put forward to the country is something that if with today's perspective we can't judge them. Our times are difficulties, but how things went. There were severe critics of everybody. Right. Gopal Krishna Adigaru, who was a very great poet of Karnataka. Right. Adigaru ondu sal baritare. Right. Ranga biddaru tere biddaru ranga bidada chirayoka anta Nehru ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಬರೀತಾರೆ. 17 ವರ್ಷ ಪ್ರೈಮ್ ಮಿನಿಸ್ಟರ್ ಆಗಿರ್ತಾರಲ್ಲ. So he uses a line, right? Tere biddaru ranga bidada chirayoka. Right? At least you should build the next line of leadership so that who next ಹೇಗೆ ಅನ್ನೋ ಐಡಿಯಾ ಬಿಲ್ಡ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು. ಸೊ ನಿಮಗೆ ಇಷ್ಟ ಆದ್ರೂ ಕೂಡ ಇನ್ನೂ ಕೂಡ ನೀವು ಪವರ್ ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಇನ್ನೊಬ್ರು ಕೊಡುವಂತ ನೀವು ಇಚ್ಛೆ ತೋರಿಸ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ ಅನ್ನೋ ಕ್ರಿಟಿಸಿಸಮ್ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಸೊ ದಟ್ಸ್ ಹೌ ದಿ ಸಿಚುವೇಶನ್ ವಾಸ್ ದೇರ್. ಹಾಗಂತ ಇವನ್ ಟು ದಿ ವರ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಕ್ರಿಟಿಕ್ಸ್ Nehru never took revenge kind of an idea at that point of time. That was the history at a point of time. So first 5-year plan, agriculture major focus area. We worked on IITs, IIMs, ISRO, atomic energy research. Lot of effort put across all this areas. Right, this was going on. Very successful 5-year plan. The target of the 5-year plan was around 2.8% that we set targets, but we achieved close to 5.6. Sorry, let me give you the correct numbers. Wait. Don't think it's exact double. The target was 2.1. We achieved 3.6. The target was 2.1. We achieved 3.6. Right. So it was a very successful 5-year plan in terms of how we worked and what kind of effort we put in that direction. Right. Now, while we were doing all this, a lot of programs were implemented, but some programs became very successful, some programs did not. Like ಮೆಕನೈಸೇಷನ್ ಆಫ್ ಅಗ್ರಿಕಲ್ಚರ್ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಸಾಕಷ್ಟು ಎಫರ್ಟ್ ಹಾಕೋದು. ರೈಟ್. ಜನರಲ್ಲಿ ಜಾಗೃತಿ ಮೂಡಿಸಿ, ಇನ್ಸ್ಟ್ರೂಮೆಂಟ್ಸ್ ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡಿ, ಇಂಪ್ಲಿಮೆಂಟ್ಸ್ ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ. ಬಟ್ ದಿಸ್ ವಾಸ್ ನಾಟ್ ಬಿಕಮಿಂಗ್ ವೆರಿ ಸಕ್ಸಸ್ಫುಲ್. ವೈ? ಬಿಕಾಸ್ ಪೀಪಲ್ ಡಿಡ್ ನಾಟ್ ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಮನಿ ಟು ಬೈ. ಪೀಪಲ್ ವೆರ್ ವೆರಿ ಪುವರ್. ಸೊ ಮೆಷಿನ್ಸ್ ಪರ್ಚೇಸ್ ಮಾಡೋದಕ್ಕೆ, ಮೆಕನೈಸೇಷನ್ ಆಗೋದಕ್ಕೆ ದಿಸ್ ವಾಸ್ ನಾಟ್ ವರ್ಕಿಂಗ್. ಸೊ ಮೆಕನೈಸೇಷನ್ ವರ್ಕ್ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ ನೋಡಿ ಅಗ್ರಿಕಲ್ಚರ್ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಟೆನ್ಷನ್ ಪ್ರೋಗ್ರಾಮ್ಸ್ ಲಾಂಚ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಗವರ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಕಡೆಯಿಂದ ಸಾಕಷ್ಟು ಸಬ್ಸಿಡೀಸ್ ನ ಕೊಟ್ಟು, ರೈಟ್, ಹೌ ವಿಲ್ ದಿಸ್ ಈಸಿಲಿ ರೀಚ್ ಪೀಪಲ್ ಅನ್ನೋ ರೀತಿ ಎಫರ್ಟ್ ಹಾಕೋದು. ದಟ್ ವಾಸ್ ಒನ್. Similarly, they also had launched a program called Community Development Program. Community Development Program and the program launch. The idea of Community Development Program was to ensure that there is grassroots level development. The idea of Community Development Program was that there will be grassroots level development, grassroots level effort towards development. This was the idea of Community Development Program. Now, Community Development Program took further shape with the idea of Block Development Program also, right? But ತುಂಬಾ ಮಹದ ಉದ್ದೇಶಗಳೊಂದಿಗೆ ಮಹದಾಸೆಯೊಂದಿಗೆ ಈ ರೀತಿ ಪ್ರೋಗ್ರಾಮ್ಸ್ ಲಾಂಚ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು ಕೂಡ ದೀಸ್ ಪ್ರೋಗ್ರಾಮ್ಸ್ ಆರ್ ನಾಟ್ ಬಿಕಮಿಂಗ್ ಸಕ್ಸಸ್ಫುಲ್. ಯಾವ ಉದ್ದೇಶಗಳನ್ನ ಸಾಧಿಸೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಅಂತ ದಿಸ್ ಪ್ರೋಗ್ರಾಮ್ಸ್ ಆರ್ ಲಾಂಚ್, ದೀಸ್ ಪ್ರೋಗ್ರಾಮ್ಸ್ ಆರ್ ನಾಟ್ ಸಕ್ಸಸ್ಫುಲ್ ಆನ್ ಗ್ರೌಂಡ್. ದಟ್ ಈಸ್ ವೈ ವಿ ಟುಕ್ ಅ ಪಿಕ್ಚರ್ ವೇರ್ ವಿ ವಾಂಟೆಡ್ ಟು ಸ್ಟಡಿ ವೈ ದೀಸ್ ಪ್ರೋಗ್ರಾಮ್ಸ್ ಆರ್ ನಾಟ್ ಸಕ್ಸಸ್ಫುಲ್. ಓಕೆ, ಯಾಕೆ ಇಷ್ಟೊಂದೆಲ್ಲಾನು ಎಫರ್ಟ್ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದ್ರು, ಈ ತರ ಪ್ರೋಗ್ರಾಮ್ ಸಕ್ಸಸ್ಫುಲ್ ಯಾಕೆ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ ನೋಡೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಗವರ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಲಾಂಚ್ಡ್ ಅ ಕಮಿಟಿ ಅಂಡ್ ದಿ ಕಮಿಟಿ ವಾಸ್ ಕಾಲ್ಡ್ Balwant Rai Mehta Committee. The committee was Balwant Rai Mehta Committee. So why was the Balwant Rai Mehta Committee set up? Balwant Rai Mehta Committee was set up to study Community Development Program. Balwant Rai Mehta Committee was set up to study Community Development Program. Why is this not becoming successful anta study ಮಾಡೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಅಂತ set up ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು. So the committee studied. Who is Balwant Rai Mehta? He is one of the greatest freedom fighter India had, right? India independence struggle ನಡೀತಾ ಇದ್ದಾಗ ಒಂದ್ ಕಡೆ ಬ್ರಿಟಿಷ್ ಇಂಡಿಯಾ ಇದ್ರೆ where there was complete control of British. Other side we had princely states. Princely states were all those states where the kings ruled, but these kings had allegiance to the British rule. That's how the India was. Correct ಅಲ್ವಾ? ಒಂದ್ ಕಡೆ ಬ್ರಿಟಿಷ್ ಇಂಡಿಯಾ ಇತ್ತು, ಇನ್ನೊಂದ್ ಕಡೆ princely states ಇತ್ತು. ಬ್ರಿಟಿಷ್ ಇಂಡಿಯಾದಲ್ಲಿ ಫ್ರೀಡಮ್ ಸ್ಟ್ರಗಲ್ ಸ್ಟ್ರಾಂಗ್ ಆಗಿ ನಡೀತಾ ಇತ್ತು. ಪ್ರಿನ್ಸ್ಲಿ ಸ್ಟೇಟ್ಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಹೇಗೆ? ಸೊ ಈ ಪ್ರಿನ್ಸ್ಲಿ ಸ್ಟೇಟ್ಸ್ ಎಲ್ಲ ಒಟ್ಟಿಗೆ ಸೇರಿ ಪ್ರಜಾಮಂಡಲ್ ಮೂವ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಅಂತ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡು. So Prajamandals allu kuda they wanted to push for that we want to integrate with the larger country anta nadita. So Prajamandal movements, one of the greatest leader was Balwant Rai Mehta, right? They were all freedom fighters. So Balwant Rai Mehta our chairmanship alli community development program na study ಮಾಡೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಅಂತ committee set up ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ. This committee gave a report. The committee very clearly said the problem in terms of the kind of governance is there is a very top down model of governance. There is no grassroots level leadership. So there is no grassroots level acceptance. ಎಲ್ಲಿವರೆಗೂ ನೀವು ಲೋಕಲ್ ಲೀಡರ್ಶಿಪ್ ಬೆಳೆಸಲ್ಲ, ಲೋಕಲ್ ಲೀಡರ್ಶಿಪ್ ಮೇಲೆ ಎನ್ಕರೇಜ್ ಮಾಡಲ್ಲ, ಅಲ್ಲಿವರೆಗೂ ಈ ತರ ಪ್ರೋಗ್ರಾಮ್ ಸಕ್ಸಸ್ಫುಲ್ ಆಗಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ ಅವರು ಕ್ಲಿಯರ್ ಕಟ್ ರಿಪೋರ್ಟ್ ಕೊಡ್ತಾರೆ, ರೈಟ್? ದೇ ಆಲ್ಸೋ ಸಜೆಸ್ಟ್ solution. They suggested, so Balwant Rai Mehta Committee suggested that India should have a 3-tier Panchayati Raj system. 3-tier Panchayati Raj system. So today we remember independent Indiaದಲ್ಲಿ ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಟೈಮ್ ಪಂಚಾಯತಿ ರಾಜ್ ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಮಾತಾಡಿದ್ ಯಾರು ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ Balwant Rai Mehta Committee ಅಂತ ರಿಮೆಂಬರ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂತೀವಿ. That's how we remember. But why was Balwant Rai Mehta Committee set up? Balwant Rai Mehta Committee was set up for community development program. UPSC Prelims ಅಲ್ಲಿ I think last decade ಅಂದ್ರೆ 2015-16 ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾವಾಗ ಒಂದ್ಸತಿ ಕೇಳಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಕಮ್ಯುನಿಟಿ ಡೆವಲಪ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಪ್ರೋಗ್ರಾಮ್ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಸ್ಟಡಿ ಮಾಡೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಸೆಟಪ್ ಆದಿದ್ ಕಮಿಟಿ ಯಾವುದು? 1, 2, 3, 4. ವಿ ಆಲ್ ನೋ Balwant Rai Mehta Committee ಫಾರ್ ಪಂಚಾಯತಿ ರಾಜ್, ಬಟ್ ಕಮ್ಯುನಿಟಿ ಡೆವಲಪ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಪ್ರೋಗ್ರಾಮ್ ಸ್ಟಡಿ ಮಾಡೋಕೆ ಸೆಟಪ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದು Balwant Rai Mehta Committee. So they suggest for a 3-tier Panchayati Raj system. They said Jilla Panchayat at the district level, Taluk Panchayat at the Taluk level, and Gram Panchayat at the village level. Ee tara you should have 3-tier Panchayati Raj system. He also suggested that we should have what is called Gram Nyayalayas. So Gram Nyayalagalu anta set up ಮಾಡಿ ಗ್ರಾಮದ ಮಟ್ಟದಲ್ಲೇನೆ ಸಣ್ಣ ಪುಟ್ಟ ವ್ಯಾಜ್ಯಗಳನ್ನ ಅಲ್ಲಲ್ಲೇ ಇತ್ಯರ್ಥಪಡಿಸೋದಕ್ಕೆ ನೋಡ್ಬೇಕು. We can't have too much of disputes coming up so that they can burden courts. Okay, so this is the suggestion of Balwant Rai Mehta Committee, right? Which was accepted, but it was not made mandatory. The suggestions were accepted, it was not made mandatory. It was left to the states that ಯಾವೆಲ್ಲ states ಈ ತರ ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್ ಅಕ್ಸೆಪ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳಕ್ ರೆಡಿ ಇದಾವೋ ಅಕ್ಸೆಪ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ, right? Rajasthan became the first state in India to accept and set up. So the suggestions were accepted by Rajasthan. Rajasthan became the first state. So first state in post-independent India to set up Panchayati Raj system was Rajasthan, and Nagaur district became the first district to set up Panchayati Raj system. Okay, Rajasthan was the first state. After that, Maharashtra, and Nagaur district was the first district to set up Panchayati Raj system. Is this the first time ever that India had Panchayati Raj system? No. India had a local self-government idea from the earliest Cholas period. ವೇದಿಕೆ ನಂತರ ಅರ್ಲಿ ಚೋಳಾಸ್ ಬರ್ತಾರಲ್ಲ ಅವ್ರ ಟೈಮ್ ಇಂದಾನು ಇಂಡಿಯಾದಲ್ಲಿ ಸಭಾ ಸಮಿತಿ ಅಂತ ಸಾಕಷ್ಟು ಲೋಕಲ್ ಗವರ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಇತ್ತು. ಸಭೆಗಳಿಂದ ಸೆಲೆಕ್ಟ್ ಆದಂತವ್ರು ಒಬ್ಬ ಸಮಿತಿ ಅಂತ ಇರ್ತಾ ಇತ್ತು. ಅವರು ರಾಜನ ಸೆಲೆಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ರು. ಪೊಸಿಷನ್ ಆಫ್ ದಿ ಕಿಂಗ್ ಆಫ್ ದಿ ರೂಲರ್ ವಾಸ್ ನಾಟ್ ಹೆರಿಡಿಟರಿ. ಸಮಿತೀಸ್ ಕುಡ್ ಚೇಂಜ್ ಹೂ ವಿಲ್ ರೂಲ್. ದ ಮೋಸ್ಟ್ ಎಜುಕೇಟೆಡ್ ಪರ್ಸನ್ ವುಡ್ ಬಿ ಚೋಸನ್. ಈ ತರ ಎಲ್ಲ ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್ಸ್ ಆ ಕಾಲದಿಂದಾನು ಇತ್ತು. ರೈಟ್. ಬ್ರಿಟಿಷರ ಕಾಲದಲ್ಲೂ ಕೂಡ ಅರೌಂಡ್ ಇನ್ 1880s we had Lord Lytton or Lord Ripon, who was called the father of local self-government in India, right? And he was the one who instituted the idea of local self-government, giving them some grants and all. So the idea of local self-government was there in history, in ancient history also, medieval history also, modern history also. Post-independence, the first suggestion that came was Balwanta Mehta Committee, where we had a Panchayati Raj system coming. Clear? This is the idea of the first fire plant time at Anadanta issue. This idea came. Okay, lot of effort was put in this direction. Ideas were taken. So first fire plan, as we discussed, was a very successful fire plan. Things worked very well. Whatever were the ideas, the most important focus went in, and we tried to solve. Food security was a major problem which we effectively worked upon in their target. Right? During this time period, we know, before we get into that 1950s only, right, Pakistan jotege ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ incidents ಆಗುತ್ತೆ, specifically in terms of Kashmir. All that was before 1950, right? That is history in terms of how Kashmir issue became an issue and how we dealt with it. Ella issues, there are challenges that you should know. That's the idea that we have to take in consideration. Now, during the first fire plan, when it was in operation itself, we found out there is something wrong. Now, ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇರೋ ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ there is something wrong. Right? And that had to be changed. Okay? Try telling me what is wrong. So what was happening in terms of the way planning was made? We had a planning commission, which is an executive body. The planning commission will prepare a draft plan. So what will the planning commission do? The planning commission will prepare a draft plan. The planning commission will submit the draft plan to, right, the Council of Ministers. Right, headed by Prime Minister. Now the Council of Ministers and Planning Commission ಮಧ್ಯ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಟು ಅಂಡ್ ಫ್ರೋ ನಡೆಯುತ್ತೆ. ಏನೇನು ಚೇಂಜಸ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಏನು ಅಂತ. ಫೈನಲ್ ಆಗಿ ಇವ್ರು ಏನು ಅಪ್ರೂವ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ತಗೊಂತಾರೆ, ಆ ಫೈನಲ್ ಪ್ಲಾನ್ ನ ಇವರೆಲ್ಲ ತಗೊಂಡು ಹೋಗ್ತಾರೆ. ರೈಟ್, ದೇ ವಿಲ್ ಟೇಕ್ ದಿ ಫೈನಲ್ ಪ್ಲಾನ್ ಟು ಪಾರ್ಲಿಮೆಂಟ್. ಪಾರ್ಲಿಮೆಂಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಚರ್ಚೆ ನಡೆಯುತ್ತೆ. ಪಾರ್ಲಿಮೆಂಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇದ್ರದ್ದೆಲ್ಲಾನು ಚೇಂಜಸ್ ಇದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಡಿಸ್ಕಷನ್ ನಡೆದು ಫೈನಲ್ ಆಗಿ ಒನ್ಸ್ ಈ ಪಾರ್ಲಿಮೆಂಟ್ ಅಪ್ರೂವ್ಸ್, it goes to the office of president, and once the president approves, this goes to implementation. This was the way in which planning was happening, the process in which planning was happening, right? So first fire plan alli ide riti madidu, but during the plan itself they found that there is something wrong. There is something that is not okay in this process. What is not okay? Planning Commission will come up with a draft plan, Council of Ministers at the center, then the final plan goes to the Parliament, right? After that, President. Then it goes to implementation. Every state has to implement. States are missing. You are a large country, right? Very diverse country. Yes, you have declared, Article 1 of the Constitution says what? India, that is Bharat, is a union of states. Yes, the union has more power, all agreed, but you have also given constitutional powers to states. You have devolved power to states. The entire process alli, when you are planning for the country, states kellu role illa. They are not listening to the states at all. The plan is made at the center and implemented down. So it's a top-down model that has come completely. States maatu kelta illa nivellunu, suggestions kelta illa nunu. This was identified. First fire plan ide riti agittu, but during the first fire plan it was identified, right? And 1952, they immediately took measures by which they now came up with a body called NDC. NDC is National Development Council. National Development Council. Right? What did they do? They set up a National Development Council. They set up a National Development Council. Right. So what is the idea now? It will not directly go from Council of Ministers to the Parliament. Rather, once the council of ministers bandmele, they will call for an NDC meeting. The NDC meeting, whatever discussions happen, that will happen to or fro. Basis mele, then it will go right as part of the path. This is how the idea of NDC. Okay. So once the draft plan has reached council of ministers and they have finalized, ಅವರು ಒಂದು NDC meeting ಕರೀತಾರೆ. ಆ NDC meeting ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಎಲ್ಲ discussions ನಡೆದು ಮತ್ತೆ to and fro base ಮೇಲೆ parliament. That's the idea that comes. Are we clear? All of us? That's the understanding that we see. So NDC or National Development Council ಅಂತ ಏನು ನೋಡ್ತಾ ಇದೀವಿ, ಆ discussions, ಆ ideas we'll have to take in consideration. Okay. Now what is NDC? NDC is National Development Council, right? The chairperson of NDC is the Prime Minister. Chairperson of NDC is the Prime Minister. Right. Then you have the Chief Ministers of all states. Chief Ministers of all states or union territories. Other union territories, you will have the administrators of union territories. Right. You have the entire planning commission. You have the entire council of ministers. These are all members of NDC. The chair of NDC is Prime Minister, Chief Ministers of all state, administrators of all union territories, Planning Commission entirely, and Council of Ministers. Ishtu jana NDC bhagavaagtare. Right? So it was a very, very powerful body. Chief Ministers of all state meaning the heads of all states. Right? And everybody comes into the idea. Are we clear? All of us? Yes. Right? This idea. Okay? NDC was correct. So, first fire plan time ಅಲ್ಲಿ NDC ಇತ್ತ ಇಲ್ಲ, ಬಟ್ ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಫೈರ್ ಪ್ಲಾನ್ ಇಂಪ್ಲಿಮೆಂಟೇಷನ್ ಆಗೋ ಟೈಮ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ NDC ಬಂತು. ಸೆಕೆಂಡ್ ಫೈರ್ ಪ್ಲಾನ್ ಇಂದ ಆಚೆಗೆ ವಿತೌಟ್ NDC ಅಪ್ರೂವಲ್ ಯು ಆರ್ ನಾಟ್ ಡೂಯಿಂಗ್ ಎನಿಥಿಂಗ್. ಓಕೆ, ಕ್ಲಿಯರ್? ಎರಡು ಸತಿ NDC ಮೀಟಿಂಗ್ ಕರೀತಾ ಇದ್ರು. ಒಂದು ಪ್ಲಾನ್ ಇಂಪ್ಲಿಮೆಂಟೇಷನ್ ಶುರು ಮಾಡೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಮುಂಚೆ ಪ್ಲಾನ್ ರೆಡಿ ಆಗಿದ್ದ ಟೈಮ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ, ನಂತರ ಪ್ಲಾನ್ ಇಂಪ್ಲಿಮೆಂಟೇಷನ್ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇರುವಾಗ ಮಿಡ್ ಟರ್ಮ್ ಎರಡೂವರೆ ವರ್ಷದ ಟೈಮ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದ್ಸತಿ ಕರೀತಾ ಇದ್ರು. ಈಗ ಮತ್ತೆ ಏನಾದ್ರು ಚೇಂಜಸ್ ಅವಶ್ಯಕತೆ ಇದೆಯಾ, ಏನಾದ್ರು ಮಾಡೋಣ ಹೇಗೆ ಅಂತ. ರೈಟ್, ಕಾನ್ಸ್ಟಿಟ್ಯೂಷನ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಸೆಂಟರ್ ಸ್ಟೇಟ್ ಗೆ ಕೋಆರ್ಡಿನೇಷನ್ ತರೋಕೆ ಸಾಕಷ್ಟು ಮೆಕ್ಯಾನಿಸಮ್ಸ್ ಇದೆ. ಇಂಟರ್ ಸ್ಟೇಟ್ ಕೌನ್ಸಿಲ್ ಅಂದಿದೆ, ಝೋನಲ್ ಕೌನ್ಸಿಲ್ಸ್ ಅಂತ ಇವೆ. ಈ ಬಾರಿ ಪ್ರಿಲಿಮ್ಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ತುಂಬಾ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆಗಳು ಕೇಳಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಪಾಲಿಟಿಯಲ್ಲಿ, ನೀವು ಅದನ್ನ ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ. ರೈಟ್, ವಿಚ್ ಆಫ್ ದಿ ಫಾಲೋಯಿಂಗ್ ಕಾನ್ಸ್ಟಿಟ್ಯೂಷನಲ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ ಝೋನಲ್ ಕೌನ್ಸಿಲ್ಸ್ ಅಂತಿದೆ. ನಾರ್ತ್ ಝೋನ್, ಸೌತ್ ಝೋನ್, ಈಸ್ಟ್ ಝೋನ್, ಸೆಂಟ್ರಲ್ ಝೋನ್, ನಾರ್ತ್ ಈಸ್ಟರ್ನ್ ಝೋನ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಝೋನಲ್ ಕೌನ್ಸಿಲ್ಸ್ ಇವೆ. ಇಂಟರ್ ಸ್ಟೇಟ್ ಕೌನ್ಸಿಲ್ ಅಂತಿದೆ, ಸೊ ದಟ್ ದೇರ್ ಇಸ್ ಇಂಟರ್ ಸ್ಟೇಟ್ ರಿಲೇಟೆಡ್ ಏನೇ ಇಶ್ಯೂಸ್ ಇದ್ರು ಕೂಡ ಡಿಸ್ಕಷನ್ ಆಗ್ಲಿ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು. ಸೆಂಟರ್ ಸ್ಟೇಟ್ ರಿಲೇಷನ್ಸ್ ಇದೆಲ್ಲ ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಪಾಲಿಟಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಹೇಳ್ಕೊಡ್ತಾರೆ. ಆ ಎಂಟೈರ್ ಐಡಿಯಾಸ್ ನ ಡಿಸ್ಕಸ್ ಮಾಡೋದು ಯು ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ದಿಸ್ ಪಿಕ್ಚರ್ ಕಮ್.